Good morning, guys, or good afternoon, whether you're joining me from the present or the future. Welcome back to another FutureFight Vanguard video. Yes, guys, I'm alive. Sorry it's been so long since I've made a video. I've actually been really focused on the second channel that I now have, which is Let's Plays Animes. If you guys haven't checked that channel already, or checked it out, rather, go ahead and check that channel out. The description is going to be down below. It's a second channel consisting of mainly now anime reactions, but there is going to eventually be video game content on there as well. So it's kind of really allowed me to expand my horizons out as far as YouTube, and I'm kind of looking to do, YouTube as, my full-time thing here in a little bit. But right now I've been just on the grind with the second channel and work and all this crazy stuff. But with this weekend being the Atlanta regionals, you guys will start seeing a lot of content from me again. I plan to get a schedule down for this channel again so that I can, go about business like I used to. And that way I'll have both of the channels balanced. Both the channels are getting content, and you guys are happy, I'm happy, everyone's happy. So, quick few notes before we start the video. If you guys haven't already, be sure to subscribe down below so that you don't have to miss a video from me. All the Cardfight related stuff that's going to be coming, you guys don't want to miss that. Also click the bell button so that you get alert as well. If you like the video, be sure to like it and share it with all your Vanguard players, your locals, your whatever is going on. Let them know about these new stronger decks that are coming up in standard, and so on and so forth. And also a quick note to our sponsor, which is Davers Cards and Games. They are a local store here in Georgia, and they are currently sponsoring me. It's a great store. Be sure to check out their link down below in the description. You can buy cards from them. They have really good prices. Also, if you're on your way to Atlanta for the regionals this weekend, I would really suggest stopping by their store and kind of buying some merchandise from them. They have a lot of sleeves and stuff like that too, that they get from Japan. So that's pretty cool as well. But with that being said, let's get right into the video. So today we're going to be talking about the AL4 Shadow Paladin standard deck. So for those of you who know me or have been part of the channel for a while, Shadow Paladin is one of my two main clans, besides Shadow Paladin and Neo Nectar. So I really like Shadow Paladin. However, it took me forever to make this video because I'm not really liking Shadow Paladin in standard, if I'm being completely honest. It does do things here and there, but I had to really try to get a build that I even decently liked because it just doesn't really fit the style that I thought I would like. So I definitely tried like Makas and all of that in the build, but that just didn't work out for me as well. I always drew triggers and stuff like that, so after a while I just preferred to up my draw triggers and then not run Maka, and then run like a retire heavy build so that I'm getting rid of my opponent's board / putting a lot of pressure on them. Also makes PBD better, and running more blaster cards makes Rapier better. So let's get right into the build. So we have, starting off with our grade 3s, Shadow Paladin is a Force clan, so it does have imaginary gift Force. Most of the time, you probably want to stack one Force trigger on Vanguard to start off with. It does put a good amount of pressure on your opponent, and then after that, I would start distributing them to the rearguard circles. That's just how I do it personally. If you guys have another reason that you put your Force markers elsewhere, or you have anything to comment on that below, make sure you put that down in the description for other people to see as well. But yeah, we have 4 Phantom Blaster Dragons, so kind of nostalgia. A lot of V series is just nostalgia of old cards being recreated, but albeit a little bit stronger. So it has 2 activation skills that are both activated on the Vanguard circle. So the first Vanguard skill is cost counterboss 1 and retire 3 of your rear guards. And your opponent chooses 3 of their rear guards, retires them, and this unit gets plus 15 power, 15k power, and a crit. So I don't know how I feel about this skill. Honestly, after playtesting with it a lot, I feel kind of iffy about it. You really only want to use it, like, it's at the point where I don't even care about the 15k power and the crit because we don't get enough advantage for retiring 3 to just be like free. Like, we're just like, oh, I don't mind retiring 3. Like, you kind of mind retiring 3, especially after you've gone through your main engine. You don't want to really do it a lot. You just want to do it to get rid of your opponent's rear guards when you can, and then I really only do it to activate the second skill, which is if your opponent has no rear guards and they have 4 or less cards in their damage zone, you can Soul Blast the grade 3 to deal 1 damage to your opponent's Vanguard. So since I'm only really using the first skill to do the second skill, then I don't really do Phantom Blaster skill like almost ever when I ride it first, because that's just not really useful unless my opponent has like really low cards in their hand. They really rushed me hard. They're committing to their board, and I know that if I destroy their board, I can attack them with the critical. They won't be able to guard, and then that will be game or something like that. But that's like a very rare case scenario where you rush your opponent, or where your opponent rushes you that hard and you have high damage on them. So kind of like, just play it safe. I like to play it safe with this deck and not, go too ham with retiring my stuff, because I know that I will eventually need to keep up the advantage game against my opponent. So yeah, for Phantom Blaster Dragon, only use the first skill to use the second skill. Next up, this is our main grade 3 that we'd like to ride first, which is the Dark Dictator. It's basically like a Shadow Paladin Alfred. It has 2 Vanguard abilities. The first one is continuous. During your turn, this unit gets plus 2,000 power for each of your rear guards. So I would say it's a little better than Alfred with its power, just because, well, it's kind of like a little worse and better at the same time. So I guess they're kind of equal, because Dark Dictator on one hand gets power for each one of your rear guards, so you don't have to have a specific unit on the board. So, well, I guess Alfred is a little better because it calls out Blaster Blade and then it has 10k power. So sorry, Dark Dictator is a little worse than Alfred. But I do think that it has its scenarios where it can be a little better. Like if you don't have a Blaster Blade on the field, you have no counterblast, like Alfred's not gaining any power without a force marker, whereas Dark Dictator is, regardless of if you have counterblast or not. Ideally, in both situations, you want to have counterblast with both decks, but without it, Dark Dictator is definitely better. With it, Dark Dictator is worse than Alfred. So its second ability, which is an Act Vanguard skill that says once per turn you can counterblast 1, call a grade 2 or less card from your hand or rear guard circle. That unit gets plus 5,000 power, and then your opponent chooses one of their cards and retires it. So the Shadow Paladin deck is pretty heavy on retire, especially this build, because I'm running Dark Dictator, Phantom Blaster, Blaster Dark, Blaster Rapier, Blaster Dagger, like all these cards that retire cards so that my opponent can't have a board. Because in my opinion, if your opponent doesn't have a board, then they're probably lacking on attack strength, which definitely relieves a lot more from you that you have to guard from them, which makes you go up an advantage inadvertently, so that you don't have to go after your opponent's stuff that much. But something that I like doing with this skill is calling Blaster Dark. It's like a CB2 Destroy 2, so like the original Blaster Dark skill, like the other one, it was Counterblast 2, destroy something when it's on ride. So basically this is like a lot better of a combo to, than the original series, where you can just Counterblast 2 and destroy 2 of your opponent's units. Also, Blaster Dark is getting 5k, so that's cool. But moving on to actual Blaster Dark. Blaster Dark has 2 abilities. The first one is a Vanguard Rearguard skill. The second one is a Vanguard only skill. The first Vanguard Rearguard skill that says when this unit is placed, counterblast 1, and your opponent chooses one of their rearguards and retires it. So a lot of times in the early game when you ride this card, since the new starters, the V series starters, stay in the soul and they allow you to draw a card, a lot of people, if you go first, will just ride their 8k and then attack you. So they won't have any rear guards, which plays in, which comes into play with Blaster Dark. Or if you go second, a lot of times they will play a card and then call 1 card. Usually they won't rush you or call more than 1 card, unless they're trying to specifically deny you from Blaster Dark. But that could end up screwing them over, because they could just lose both of their rear guards that they played down, which is not always the smartest of options. Like sometimes you would just rather have the Blaster Dark take its Twin Drive, which is its second ability. So Vanguard skill once per turn. If your opponent has no rear guards, we can retire a card, or sorry, discard a card from our hand, and then this unit gets +1 drive. So it gets Twin Drive, punishing our opponent for having no rear guards. If they have 1 or less rear guards, like pretty much still punishing them for having no rear guards, because then we're going to ride Blaster Dark, blow that 1 rear guard that they have, and then use the skill to get Twin Drive. So really, really good card overall. So then we have 4 Tragic Knight Cathbad. What Cathbad does is it has a rearguard skill that says when this unit attacks a Vanguard, this unit gets plus 3,000 power until the end of the battle for each rearguard that you have that's more than your opponent. And then has a parentheses thing that says plus 9,000 if you have 5 and your opponent has 2 rearguards. So basically this is like our big beater of the deck. Since this is a retire heavy build, he's like perfect in here because a lot of times you want your opponent to have no rearguards. So if your opponent has no rearguards and you have a full board, this card gets plus 15k, which like outside of the boost, like that's insane. Like that's automatically 33k rearguards swinging at your opponent without force markers that are bound to be on your rearguard circle. So these hit for really, really big, require your opponent to guard for really, really big. And something that I really like doing is right after you use Phantom Blaster skill to retire 3 and they retire 3, if your opponent has 0 after that and then you shoot them for a damage with Phantom Blaster, a lot of times they'll be at 4 or even 3, but a lot of times they're at 4 or 5. So you can attack them with Phantom Blaster, and then a lot of times they can guard the attack because they're at 4 damage. Like a lot of times when they're at 4 damage, they guard, hoping, you know, that you won't hit them because this has a crit. But then you can just stack all the crit and power onto Cathbad, and it'll be swinging for even bigger than Phantom Blaster was with the crit. So a lot of times, unless they have 2 PGs, they can't really guard that, which is really, really cool. Then rounding out our grade 2 lineup, we have 4 Blaster Rapier. So what Rapier does is when it attacks a Vanguard on the rearguard circle, if you have 3 or more units with Blaster in its card name, this unit gets plus 5,000 power. So like I said, running a good amount of Blaster cards really helps this card be at 4 in the build. So we run Phantom Blaster Dragon, you know, it's on the Vanguard circle, it counts. So Phantom Blaster Dragon, Blaster Dark, Blaster Rapier, Blaster Dagger, and Blaster Javelin are our 5 different 4 of Blaster cards that we run to make Rapier a better card as well, and because they have really good effects in themselves. The second ability is when this card's attack hits a Vanguard, counterboss 1, your opponent chooses one of their rearguards and retires it. So again, just keeping that style of really heavy retire in this deck, really heavy control. I would say that, you know, this deck damn near has more control than Kagero Standard, because a lot of times when I'm playing Kagero Standard, like, you can destroy stuff, but like all the costs are like too heavy and stuff. Like Dagger is pretty much free. All you have to do is hit them. Blaster Rapier, you hit them, you counterboss 1. So you're like either causing a counterblast or you're moving a unit to the soul for your retire each single time. So it's pretty cool in that respect. Yeah, you're just keeping up the style of heavy retire. But moving on to our grade 1s, we have 4 Blaster Dagger. Like I was just talking about, keeping up the style of heavy retire. Its skill is when it's on the rearguard circle and its attack or an attack that it boosted hits a Vanguard. So this card can be the attacker or be helping the attacking unit. And as long as the attack hits and completes on the Vanguard circle, they take a damage. And then you put this unit into your soul, your opponent chooses one of their rearguards and retires it. So very, very good to keep your opponent's board down. And you don't really use your soul for anything in this build. In the other build, you use your soul for Sharon, but I ended up not playing Sharon in this build because I just didn't like it overall over time. So we just ran Blaster Dagger, and then it goes to the soul. You don't really use any soul after that. Then moving on to another 4 of that we have is Blaster Javelin. Blaster Javelin's a really good advantage card when it's placed in general on the rearguard circle. If you have 2 or more grade 1 or less units, then you can counterboss 1, draw a card, and this unit gets plus 3,000 power. So a lot of times on your early grade 2 rush, like you can play this down, and it's basically you're playing a free card because since you draw a card for playing Javelin from your hand, it's free. And it's 11k when you use the skill. So really, really good to beat your opponent's face in. Like you can call Blaster Dark, make them retire a card, discard a card to get Twin Drive, call like Cathbad, and then call a grade 1, which can be like Dagger, and then you can call Blaster Javelin to the other front row, counterboss 1, draw a card. Now you're 11k, you can hit them with all 3 of your attacks, assuming that they don't check damage triggers, and you can just get the rush started off really, really well. So then we run 4 Skull Witch Domain. This card we run not because of its boost or anything like that, but it's because it's an engine. So this is like a main engine. What I mean by that is its skill is when it's on the rearguard circle, you rest this unit, and then you can choose search your deck for up to 1 card with 5,000 power, call it to an open rearguard circle, shuffle your deck, and this unit's ability can only be used once each time, even with cards with the same name on the board. Meaning that if you use the main skill to get another main, you cannot use that main skill. It's not like once per turn like that. It's like once per turn in general among all the cards with the same name. So you're using the main, like I said, to get an engine. It also thins out your deck, so you're more likely to check triggers and units that you actually need instead of checking the main or like, you know, other cards that you just don't need at the time. Like if I run out of the mains and I can use the main skill, I usually end up calling Howl Owl because it's, you know, a 5k. Like if we're losing it out of our deck, it's like the least valuable trigger to lose out of our deck, so that we don't check it. But yeah, otherwise than that, they're used as boost, and then they're pretty much just used as like PvD fodder. But it has a lot of uses just being in the deck the way that it is. And then we have a 1-of grade 1 spot. So I chose to run Nightmare Painter in this spot, purely because Nightmare Painter is just, you know, really good. I like it. Like I said, we don't really use a soul a lot in this deck, but it can become a 10k, and this was kind of like the only standard Shadow Paladin card that I found that can like kind of become a Suedo grade 2 attacker. Besides the Dark Knight whatever thing that has to have 6 units on the board, and I don't want to rely on having to have 6 units to make that unit a, you know, basically a grade 2. So I'd rather have Nightmare Painter if we need an attacker like in the early game. We can discard a grade 1 or less with a Blaster Dark, and then actually just play Nightmare Painter right after that in the front row, move a card to Soul, and then it's 10k, able to hit your opponent's grade 2 Vanguard. So very, very good for that if you start off with it. So then for our starter, we run Full Bow. This is our regular when rode upon, draw a card. Pretty basic V-Series stuff. And then for our triggers, we ran 6 crit, 6 draw, and 4 heal. Obviously, you know, 6 V-Series crit triggers because we are in, you know, standard, only V-Series stuff. 4 of our draw PG or our Sentinel trigger, because we want to be able to, you know, protect our opponent's really big threatening attacks that we can block with a Sentinel. A cough cough waterfall, I'm looking at you. But yeah, you want to block as many high powered, like there's like a lot of threatening Vanguards out there. There's like Imperial Daughter, there's you know, Dragonic Overlord, there's a bunch of stuff. There's other Shadow Paladin matchups PvD, which is actually something I forgot to mention about Skull Witch Domain. It's really great if you start off with it turn 1 against another Shadow Paladin player, or in general actually, because you get the engine started in general when you're against anything else. But when you're against another Shadow Paladin player, you ride to grade 1, draw a card, and then you play the main and search in the main. What that means is that when your opponent rides to grade 2 and they ride Blaster Dark, unless you've done them 2 damage, your opponent will not be able to use Blaster Dark's skill to gain Twin Drive, which means that they're losing out on some advantage. And if you rode before them and you're able to get your Blaster Dark's Twin Drive off because they didn't have the main, then that's a really good advantage for you, and you can just keep that engine going. But with that being said, let's get into the couple of games that we played here. I'm gonna look at this real quick to see how many games I have to show y'all. It's been a while since I've done this. Alright, so we're opening back our Cardfight area right now so that we can show you guys the games. So let's load our first game. So Shadow Paladin 1. So we're playing against Kagero. This is the new, like, area's updated, so this is the new, like, Novell Kagero deck. We decided to ride. He doesn't play a rearguard, so I'm kind of just attacking him with Blaster Dark. He does check a heal trigger, however, and heal down, so Rapier does not hit. We do take Dragonic Overlord, however, we take a damage. He uses the skill to drop 2, and then he checks Novell. We take another damage, and then we take another damage for 21, because I really just didn't want to guard. I played down Phantom Blaster because we didn't have a Dark Dictator ride. I attack with Cathbad, he guards it, and then I attack with Vanguard, I check the crit, and then I attack with Cathbad for really big, and he just decides to guard it, because I guess he didn't want to be at 5 damage that early. He waterfalls me, and I guard his waterfall for 2 to pass. He checks no triggers, and the turn passes over to us. We ride the Dark Dictator, move up our Javelin, and then we use our skill to call the draw trigger plus 5k. So I was hoping that I would check a trigger here, However, I did not, which was unfortunate. And then our opponent does ride Novell and use the skill to Soul Blast out a grade 3 against 2,000 or 20,000, and then none of my units are retired because we both don't have 5 damage. And then he puts Gaia to Soul, which would have been really scary if I didn't have a PG, but I did, so I PG'd his card. And then I dealt him a damage with PBD since he didn't have a damage, he didn't have any rear guard, so I dealt him a damage using PBD skill that I rode, and then I just attacked him. He has 3 cards in his hand, and I have 3 attacks, so unless he could guard each attack with 1 card, he would not survive the turn. Even if he did survive the turn, I have another PG in my hand, and he would have just had his Vanguard. So I think ultimately that game was clinched by me, no matter how you look at it. But starting up our area again so that we can get started with game 2. Oh, snap. There we go. Alright, so we're loading up Shadow Paladin 2. So we're playing against Kagero again. Like, obviously right now, like, since area just updated again, I'll tell you guys, like, everyone's just spamming Kagero and Royals. So we do take his rearguard attack that allows him to search a Novell, so he does that and then he checks a crit. So pretty lucky against us initially. And then he does play 3 rearguards, so our double Blaster Dark play doesn't get him to 0 rearguards, but we do check a draw trigger, which is cool. Put on Calf Bad. And then he checks the crit trigger and a heal trigger on Overlord, so I was like, wow, blessed. So then we PG his remaining Overlord attack, and then we guard with a heal trigger. We play Dark Dictator, attack him, check 2, no triggers, because I guess we're just unlucky this game, and then we attack rearguard for 15, and then he Novells and makes us retire because we have 5. And so we just lose because if we PG and we drop it, it's still not enough to guard this, and then it doesn't even matter because I basically just took a damage before he drove check, because when you're against Novell, like, all your trigger effects are nullified, so there's no way that I can 6 damage heal out of that, so there's literally no way that I can win the game. And Novell is just really one of those really, like, dumb cards where people don't think that it's good, but I think that it can be really good depending on how you play against your opponent. Like, if you get really lucky in the early game, you put your opponent to 5 fast, and then they have to play down units to combat you, and then you use the skill to retire 5, like, that's devastating. And most of the time it's in a way where your opponent cannot recover. The only way that I would have been able to guard that attack is if I used my grade 2 to intercept, which was no longer there because Novell retired my field, and then I was at 5 on top of that. So really, really good for the Kagero player if they, get really lucky in the early game with riding, Dragonic Overlord, and it does really well or something like that. Moving into game 3 of Shadow Paladin, we're playing against Nova Grappler. He rides Death Army guy. We attack him. We don't hit because he rides a 9k. So then he calls cards. So I think initially he wasn't going to call any cards, but then he realized that I could Blaster Dark him. But to his surprise, I guess I would say, we had double Blaster Dark in our hand, so we're able to just retire 2 and still discard for our Twin Drive. Unfortunately, we don't check a trigger, so we just go after him normal. He does ride a Shura Kaiser, and he ends up playing a booster behind his Vanguard, and then he attacks with Burst Riser. Then he attacks with a Shura Kaiser. We no guard. He checks the draw trigger. He draws the Shura Kaiser, and then he checks Cat Buller. So then he tried to use the skill of Burst Riser to restand, and I told him that he could not do that because Burst Riser is on Vanguard attack. So if you could do it that way, that would be really broken, because then a Shura Kaiser, you could check with the Shura Kaiser, and if you don't stand with the Shura Kaiser, then you could use Burst Riser skill, but instead of the other way around, where you have to use Burst first. So I told him that he couldn't do that, and then he quit the game. So I would say, though, that we definitely were in a winning position in this game, because no matter how you look at it, like, I was going to ride Phantom Blaster. I was probably going to call that other dagger, and then I was going to attack his Vanguard. He probably would have let me hit, like, sometime, and then I would have been able to get rid of his Burst Riser. And after that, like, it just all goes downhill for him as far as advantage and being able to actually combat me, because, he's playing Nova Grappler. He needs his units. But the good thing about the Retire build, or this Retire build of Shadow Paladin Standard, is you can actually go after your opponent's Vanguard and not care, because while you're going after their Vanguard, Dagger makes it so that you're going after their Vanguard and their rear guard at the same time. Once you no longer need the boost from Dagger, you're putting into the Soul to destroy one of your opponent's units. So our fourth game, I decided to play one more because of that, game where that guy quit. So we're actually playing against Murakumo. We check the draw trigger. So he plays 2 units, so I can't, get off Blaster Dark all the way, and then he checks a draw trigger and a heal off my crit, so pretty good. And then he decides to rush us pretty hardcore with Mandala, so I'm guessing this is like a Mandala rush deck. He does check a front trigger. I do check a heal, giving power to my Vanguard, and I do check a crit and a Dark Dictator. So I ride Dark Dictator, call Painter, he retires one, and then I call Javelin to, get a free card on my board. I attack his Vanguard for 41. I do get a draw trigger, putting it to Rapier and draw. And then he guards my Rapier, I'm guessing, so that he won't have to get one of his units retired. And then he attacks us. We 2 to pass him, and he hits draw trigger, and he all Vanguards. So I was like, wow. And then we checked the draw trigger, so we intercepted, and then guarded with a card from our hand. So we actually rode Phantom Blaster, and this is what I was talking about. Like, we retired 3 of his cards. He's an Excel deck, so he's put in a pretty bad situation by that. We use Rapier to retire yet another one of his cards. He has to PG our Vanguard, and then he guards the rear guard as well. So something that happened here is I had him on the ropes, and then he rode Zombaku and had an Arrestor in his hand. So he used the skill to call right Arrestor and make me not restand. I think I was being dumb by guarding my rear guards when, I should have just put them up so that I could survive the next turn. But I did attack him for 32, where he had to, guard with a good amount of cards from his hand. He top decks Zombaku, and then he uses the Zombaku skill that's already on his Vanguard to call left Arrestor. So I couldn't do anything about that unless I just 6 damage heal, and unfortunately I did not. So just one of those cases of Murakumo being broken as hell in Standard. But yeah, those were the games, and that is the video. I hope you guys really enjoyed the video. If you guys did, leave a thumbs up on the video. Let me know what you think about the Shadow Paladin Standard deck down below. Like I said, you guys can look forward to many different videos from me this week, especially with the regionals right around the corner. Hopefully we're aiming to win that again. I've been putting a lot of practice in for that. But yeah, with that being said, this has been Josh from Cardfight Empire, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Peace, guys.